Once upon a time, in the heart of a prosperous Nigerian kingdom called Udo, there lived a wealthy king named Oba Adeola. His kingdom was filled with riches, vast farmland, and precious gold. Despite the king's wealth, he lived a lonely life, for he had no one who genuinely cared for him. Everyone in the palace admired him for his riches, but no one truly knew him as a person. Oba Adeola had many advisors and courtiers who praised him daily, but deep inside, he knew they were only after his wealth. Tired of feeling like a golden statue admired for his riches, the king yearned for someone who would love him for who he was. He often sat by the palace windows, gazing out into the fields, wondering if he would ever find someone who saw beyond the crown. One day, Oba Adeola came up with a bold idea. He decided to leave the palace in disguise as a poor farmer to live among the common people. His plan was simple. He would find a village far from his kingdom, hide his true identity, and see if anyone would be kind to him without knowing he was a king. He shared his plan with his most trusted servant, Afolabi, who tried to warn him of the dangers. "Your Majesty, what if something happens to you? The people do not know who you are." But the king was determined. He donned old, torn clothes and left the kingdom at dawn, leaving behind his crown and royal riches. After traveling for many days, Oba Adeola arrived at Akinlabi village, a small settlement with humble, hard-working people. There, he pretended to be a poor farmer who had lost everything. He took up a small hut at the edge of the village and began living a simple life, working in the fields alongside other villagers. At first, no one paid much attention to him. He was just another stranger trying to survive. But Oba Adeola found peace in the simplicity of the village, where people greeted each other kindly and no one cared about titles or wealth. One hot afternoon, while working in the fields, Oba Adeola met Ayo, a young village girl who lived with her father, Baba Durojaye. Ayo was known for her kind heart, always helping those in need, even though she and her father struggled to make ends meet. When she saw Oba Adeola struggling with his work, she approached him with a smile and offered him water. "You look tired. Please rest a while," Ayo said, handing him a small gourd of water. The king, though unused to such simple acts of kindness, accepted the water gratefully. For the first time in a long time, he felt that someone cared about him as a person, not as a king. Over the next few weeks, Oba Adeola and Ayo became friends. She would often visit him at his small hut, bringing food and sharing stories of the village life. Her laughter and kindness brightened his days, and Oba Adeola began to feel a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He admired Ayo's humility and strength. She worked hard on her father's farm, yet she always found time to help others. Slowly, the king realized that he was beginning to care for her deeply, but he worried, how could he tell her the truth about who he really was? One evening, after a long day in the fields, Ayo's father, Baba Durojaye, sat with her by the fire. He noticed how much time she was spending with the stranger, and he grew concerned. "Ayo, be careful," he warned. "We don't know much about this man. He could be hiding something." Ayo reassured her father that she trusted the stranger. "Father, he is a good man, just down on his luck. He has never done anything but show kindness." Baba Durojaye sighed, but he trusted his daughter's judgment and said no more. The annual festival of harvest was approaching, a time when the village celebrated the fruits of their labor with music, dancing, and feasting. Ayo invited Oba Adeola to join her family for the celebration. Although he was hesitant at first, fearing that someone might recognize him, he agreed. As the village gathered for the festival, Oba Adeola marveled at the joy and unity among the villagers. It was so different from the lavish but empty feasts he held in his kingdom. Here, people danced with genuine happiness, and the food, though simple, was shared with love. During the festival, Ayo found herself watching the stranger more closely. There was something about him that intrigued her. He was humble and quiet, but there was a sense of dignity in the way he carried himself. She couldn't help but feel drawn to him, though she tried to push the feelings aside. As the night wore on, Ayo's friend, Funmi, teased her. Ayo, I see the way you look at him. You like him, don't you? Ayo blushed and shook her head, but deep down, she knew there was some truth to Funmi's words. One night, a fierce storm hit the village. The rain poured down heavily, and the winds howled like wild animals. Oba Adeola's small hut could barely withstand the force of the storm, and soon it began to leak. Cold and wet, he wrapped himself in a thin blanket and tried to sleep, but the wind made it impossible. As the storm raged, there was a knock at his door. It was Ayo, soaked from head to toe, holding a lantern. I couldn't sleep knowing you were in this hut alone, she said, her voice full of concern. Come to our house, you'll be safer there. Oba Adeola hesitated, but seeing her genuine worry, he agreed and followed her through the storm. Ayo and her father welcomed Oba Adeola into their home, offering him dry clothes and a warm meal. Baba Durojaye, still cautious of the stranger, watched him closely but said nothing. As they sat by the fire, warming themselves from the cold storm, Oba Adeola felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in years. Thank you for your kindness, he said to both Ayo and her father. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Baba Durojaye looked at him sternly and replied, kindness does not need repayment. It is given freely, but trust must be earned. These words struck Oba Adeola deeply, and he vowed to prove himself worthy of their trust. As time went on, some villagers began to notice how much time Ayo was spending with the stranger. Whispers spread quickly throughout Akinlabi village, with people speculating about who this mysterious man could be. Some said he was an outcast from another village, while others claimed he was hiding from trouble. Ayo paid no attention to the rumors. She knew the stranger as a kind, hard-working man who had never asked for more than what he needed, but the village elders were not so easily convinced. One day, they called a meeting and summoned Oba Adeola to appear before them, demanding to know the truth about who he was. The village elders sat in a circle, their faces stern and serious. They asked Oba Adeola many questions. Where did you come from? Why are you here? What is your true purpose? Oba Adeola, caught off guard, struggled to answer without revealing his true identity. He told them he was a simple farmer who had lost his land and come to Akinlabi to start over. The elders were not satisfied with his answers, but they had no proof that he was lying. After much discussion, they warned him to stay out of trouble and not to disrupt the peace of the village. Oba Adeola nodded, grateful that they had not pressed further. But he knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would come out. After the meeting with the elders, Ayo began to notice small things about the stranger that didn't quite add up. He spoke differently than the other villagers, and his manners were more refined. He seemed to know things that a poor farmer wouldn't know. like the workings of politics and trade. Ayo's curiosity grew, but she didn't want to confront him directly. One evening, as they sat together in the field watching the sunset, Ayo gently asked, "Who are you really? I feel there's more to your story than what you've told me." Oba Adeola looked at her, his heart heavy with guilt. He wanted to tell her the truth, but fear held him back. Instead, he simply said, "I am just a man who is looking for something I haven't found yet." Baba Durojaye had been observing the growing bond between Ayo and the stranger, and his worry deepened. One night, he sat Ayo down and spoke to her in a low, serious tone. "Ayo, I can see you care for this man, but I must warn you to be careful. We do not know his past, and he could bring trouble to our village." Ayo respected her father's wisdom, but she also trusted her own heart. "Father, I know he's different, but he's been nothing but kind to us. I don't believe he would harm anyone." Baba Durojaye sighed. "I hope you're right, my daughter. Just remember that not everything is as it seems." Soon another festival approached in Akinlabi village, a time for celebration and forgiveness. The village buzzed with excitement, but Ayo was still uncertain. She hadn't spoken much to Oba Adeola since his apology, but her father's words weighed heavily on her mind. As the festival began, Ayo decided to go, hoping the joy of the celebration would lift her spirits. When she arrived, she saw Oba Adeola standing at a distance, watching her with hope in his eyes. Despite everything, her heart softened just a little, and she gave him a small nod. Encouraged, the king knew he still had a chance to earn her trust back. During the festival, Oba Adeola approached Ayo again, but this time he didn't speak of love. Instead, he offered her a simple gesture of friendship. "Let me start over," he said. "Let me prove that I can be the man you thought I was, with or without the crown." Ayo hesitated, but then she saw the sincerity in his eyes. She agreed to give him another chance, but only as a friend. "We will see if you can earn my trust again," she said, her voice firm but kind. Oba Adeola smiled, grateful for the small step forward. He knew it would be a long journey, but he was willing to wait for as long as it took. Over the next few weeks, Oba Adeola worked hard to rebuild Ayo's trust. He helped her and Baba Durojaye in the fields, shared meals with them, and never once mentioned his wealth or status. The villagers noticed the change in him and began to accept him as one of their own. Ayo, too, started to see the man beneath the crown. He was kind, humble, and hardworking, and she couldn't deny that her feelings for him were slowly returning. But she still kept her guard up, not wanting to be hurt again. She needed to be sure that he was genuine. One day, Afolabi returned to the village with urgent news. The palace in Udo was in turmoil. Without the king's presence, the advisors were growing restless, and rumors of rebellion were spreading. "Your Majesty," Afolabi said, bowing before Oba Adeola, "the kingdom needs you. You cannot stay here any longer. Your people are waiting." Oba Adeola felt torn. He knew his duties as a king, but he didn't want to leave Ayo and the peaceful life he had found in the village. Ayo, overhearing their conversation, felt conflicted as well. She didn't want him to leave, but she knew he had a responsibility to his kingdom. That night, Ayo couldn't sleep. She thought about all the moments she had shared with Oba Adeola, the kindness he had shown her, and the way he had tried to make amends for his deception. She realized that her feelings for him were still strong, and she didn't want to lose him again. In the morning, Ayo went to Oba Adeola's hut and told him her decision. "You have to return to your kingdom," she said softly. "Your people need you. But if you want me by your side, I will go with you." Oba Adeola's heart swelled with joy. "I do," he said, "more than anything." They embraced, knowing that their journey together was far from over. Ayo and Baba Durojaye accompanied Oba Adeola back to the kingdom of Udo. The palace was grand and magnificent, far different from the humble village life they were used to. Ayo felt a little overwhelmed at first, but Oba Adeola stood by her side, reassuring her that she belonged there with him. The palace staff, though surprised by the king's choice of companion, welcomed Ayo with open arms. She quickly adapted to her new surroundings, and even Baba Durojaye found peace in the royal gardens, tending to the flowers and herbs. Oba Adeola's return brought stability back to the kingdom of Udo. The advisors who had been on the verge of panic were relieved to see their king once more. Oba Adeola immediately set to work, ensuring that peace and prosperity were restored. But he was no longer the king who had left in search of something more. His time in Akinlabi village had changed him. He ruled with more compassion and wisdom, knowing that true power did not come from wealth or titles, but from the love and trust of his people. As the months passed, Ayo found her place in the palace. She wasn't just a king's companion. She became beloved by the people for her kindness and humility. She helped those in need, just as she had in the village, and soon the people of Udo grew to admire her. Oba Adeola watched her with pride, knowing that he had found something far more precious than gold or riches. Ayo had become not only his love, but also the heart of the palace, bringing warmth and joy to all who knew her. One day, as they sat together in the palace garden, Oba Adeola turned to Ayo and smiled. "I left the palace to find true love," he said softly, "and I found it in you. But more than that, I learned that love cannot be bought or forced. It must be earned through trust, kindness, and honesty." Ayo smiled back, knowing that their journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. Together they had faced challenges and overcome them. Their love had grown stronger, not because of wealth or power, but because they had learned to see each other for who they truly were. And so Oba Adeola and Ayo ruled the kingdom of Udo with wisdom and love, teaching their people that true happiness comes from the heart, not from riches or titles. Their story became a legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that love, honesty, and kindness are the greatest treasures of all. Thank you for tuning in to Tales Motherland again. We sincerely appreciate your viewership and likes and comments. Please be sure to hit the subscribe and like button and stay connected to us for new intriguing African stories and folktale. Once again, thanks for watching.